I do just want to get this out of the way first. These devices do feel remarkably similar, which is pretty interesting considering just how different the Note line and the S line tend to be. They both use 6.7-inch Super AMOLED displays with that hole punch cutout, and they run at the sort of slightly stretched out equivalent of 1080p. So not quite as pixel dense as we've seen in the premium versions of these phones, but still really quite good. We got a lot of detail as we were watching videos and sifting through some photos, which we'll kind of get to a little bit later, but the color was a bit off. I just really think that's because both of these are devices pulled out of the box and they haven't really had their color modes changed at all. But regardless, there are some important differences we need to dig into. For example, at least in the versions that we just played with, the Galaxy S10 Lite uses the Snapdragon 855 chipset, which is, as you would guess, pretty fast. This is a speedy device to be sure, and I really felt like there wasn't much compromise made here. There are definitely factors that Samsung had to dial down in order to really sell these things for a lower price point, but we'll get to those a bit later. The Note 10 Lite, meanwhile, uses one of Samsung's 7nm Exynos chipsets, and we're not exactly sure which one, but performance between the Note 10 Lite with its Exynos and the S10 Lite felt just about neck and neck. So we're looking at pretty much premium performance across the board. Now, no matter which of these devices kind of does it for you, the commonalities here are too close to disregard. Both, for example, come with 128 gigs of internal storage. You can get them with either 6 or 8 gigabytes of RAM, although the price tags are still kind of up in the air on both of those. And both of them come with 4,500 milliamp hour batteries, which are pretty huge. That's partially because they needed to drive these big displays, even though they're 1080p. They should also go a long way in making sure that these high-powered chipsets continue to run for a long time, but I'm never going to complain about more battery life. And it looks like these two devices are poised to give you just a bit more than the devices that they are kind of stemming from. Ultimately, there are a few key differences. Obviously, the Note 10 Lite uses one of Samsung's S Pens, but I have to point out it is not the exact same S Pen that you're used to in the standard Note 10 line. We tried some of the air gestures, which always seemed to work more or less fine on the Note 10. They were a little finicky, but what are you going to do? Those didn't work here at all. So while you can do things like switch between cameras using the double click on the S Pen, you can't do this weird C gesture with the S Pen to zoom in or out of your subject. That said, writing on the Note 10 Lite with the S Pen feels more or less as good as it always has. It maybe lacks some of the little tactile touches that kind of made the traditional Note 10's S Pen feel a little bit more like pen on paper, but at this point we're just sort of picking this. And if you're after the Note 10 experience and don't want to spend a ton of money, this might be a phenomenal choice for you. The S10 Lite might be a bit of a harder sell just because devices like the S10e exist, and in the conversations we've had with Samsung, we haven't gotten a clear sense of why they thought a device like the S10 Lite should exist alongside the S10e, which kind of sticks to the same formula. It aims to deliver premium performance on a pretty modest price tag. Hopefully we'll learn more as the week goes on. I do really have to give the Note 10 Lite the nod because I think it has the better camera setup. Both of them come with 3 cameras on the back, but while the Note 10 Lite uses a more traditional wide, ultra-wide, and telephoto triple camera setup, the S10 Lite kind of goes in on a 5 megapixel macro camera instead, which we've tried. It works decently enough, but honestly, how often do you shoot macro day to day? I mean, I don't. We honestly haven't had that much time to play with either of these devices, but they have made pretty good impressions, and that's at least partially because the phones that they're based on were just kind of so good to start with. There are still a lot of questions here, and I think the biggest among them is, what do these things cost? We cannot accurately gauge how much better a value these phones are than the ones that they sort of stem from without knowing what they cost. And we just don't know. We don't even really have a great idea of where these things are going to launch. We could make some educated guesses, but that feels a little irresponsible. There's still a lot of mystery surrounding these devices, but I'm personally very excited to see Samsung go in this direction. I think taking this kind of performance and making it available to more people makes sure the future, as it happens, is more evenly distributed. And that's a cause to be championed, but exactly how strong that cause is worth championing in this case kind of depends on